The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. Then it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Brought to you by the National Cannabis Coalition.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Yeah, welcome Tokers and Tokettes. It is Monday, July 9th, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for waiting a week to join us. We needed that week off to celebrate America's independence and get everything straight here at National Cannabis Radio, but we are back full bore, ready to go, all cylinders cooking here. We are ready to have a great show, and of course, everyone here in the studio is ready to join me in that endeavor, including Wiz Kaliko over here on camera 2. How you doing, Kaliko?
Doing quite well. I am glad to be here and ready to join on this journey.
Yay, Wiz Kaliko is back, and we've got Ganja John over here in the engineer section.
What's up, Russ?
Oh, I'm having a good time. Trying to get all our levels set back up here, make sure everyone can hear us. We've also testies. We've also got Brian Red hanging out over there on camera 2. Oh, that other camera. Got to switch to that camera. How you doing, Brian?
I'm here, Russ. Oh, there's the mic. All right.
And then let's go to our virtual studio in Astoria, Oregon, where we've got Cannabis Carrie waiting with our news headlines. How you doing, Carrie?
That's right. Full crew today, Russ. I love it.
I know. The studio audience is just loving it here. So we're all ready to get back. I know you've been missing us, missing the news, missing all of these segments that we do here on National Cannabis Radio, the Russ Belville Show. Let's get right to it. Carrie brings us our news right after the first break. What's in the headlines today?
Well, you know, when we take a week off, we're going to play catch up the first couple days. So first off, we're going to cover a few stories that happened last week while we were off. We've got a story to cover coming out of Kentucky. We're going to talk to you about those Oregon initiatives that were battling their way to try to get that signature threshold by last week. And also, I'm going to tell you about a new strain that is coming out. You know, we do like to talk about strains. This one you might not be rushing to get for your next party, but I'll tell you all about that coming up on the Daily Cannabis Chronicles.
All right, we'll get right to that. Also coming up on today's show, it's Roots Monday. So for our daily Toker tunes today, I'm going to bring you some local music, a group called Fruition, and they just played live on the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour on their last episode. So if you missed it, I'm going to bring you some of this live bluegrass music from right here at Rolla J Studios. Then at half past the hour, we've got a director joining us. It's Directors Week today. We've got Rod Pittman from Hemsters Plant the Seed and A Normal Life joining us live in studio. And then at the end of the show, a little time for me to catch you up on the kinder, gentler drug war and the recent statements by New Jersey's rotund Governor Christie. All that, plus your calls in Hour 2 in Toker Talk Radio, coming up next on The Russ Belville Show.
It's simply business. It's simply business. It's simply business, you know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Brought to you by the National Cannabis Coalition.
It's simply business. It's simply business. It's simply business, you know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business. simply business, you know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business.
Support the Russ Belville Show. Text the word Russ to 420-420 and connect with the National Cannabis Coalition. You can also send $10 to the Russ Belville Show right from your smartphone. That's Russ to 420-420. You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
I'll say, little red Corvette, darling, your mud's too fast. Little red Corvette, you need a lover that's gonna lay.
Ganja John, freaking out stoner comedian since 2011. Marijuana's not going to re-legalize itself. You've got to do your part. Join the National Cannabis Coalition today at nationalcannabiscoalition.com. Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, ganja sacrament, consumer cannabis. The topic of marijuana is heating up the news, and the Russ Belville Show catches you up with today's latest headlines. Now, here's our senior news editor, Cannabis Carey, with the Daily Cannabis Chronicle.
Day after Independence Day, Kentucky State Senator Perry Clark introduced a proposal to legalize medical marijuana in the state of Kentucky. It would be up for consideration in next year's session of the General Assembly. From a news conference, the Democrat from Louisville announced that the bill will be named in honor of the late Lexington attorney that was known for his advocacy of civil liberties, privacy rights, public education, and marijuana legalization. Gate Galbraith was a 5-time candidate for Kentucky governor. He ran for the Kentucky Attorney General spot, but was mostly known for his outspoken views, his quick wit, and his efforts to legalize marijuana in the state of Kentucky. He died in January. Senator Clark admitted in the news conference last Thursday that it would be very, very difficult to get enough support to pass the bill in the bluegrass state, but says that the Gateway Galbraith Medical Marijuana Act is a civil liberty issue. Senator Perry Clark has admitted to using marijuana and calls it a miracle plant. He added, quote, "The concept of prohibition of a medicine is opposed to the very freedoms that this country was once about. It's an anathema to freedom." Now, this is a liberty issue. If Senator Clark can garner the support he needs over the next 10 months, the bill would allow people to get a doctor's recommendation to use marijuana as a medical therapy. Kentuckians that had such a recommendation would be allowed to purchase up to 5 ounces of usable marijuana a month at a distribution center, or they could grow up to 5 marijuana plants at a time for their own personal use. The act, also known as Senate Bill 129, was introduced this last January, but it never received a hearing, so Clark is pushing the bill for the 2013 legislative session. The bill includes language to reschedule marijuana as a Schedule II drug in Kentucky, as well as legalize it for the medical uses. Members of Galbraith's family attended the press conference last Thursday, including both of his daughters, that spoke in favor of the bill. Senator Perry Clark faces re-election in November against Republican Chris Thyman. Clark says that he is not afraid of his opponent using his stance on marijuana against him. He says that he will always fight for civil liberties and doesn't care if he is elected or not. Perry has served in the Senate since 2006 and had previously served in the Kentucky House.
If I may quote the great Gatewood Galbraith about this medical marijuana law and his actions that trying to get this passed. "For all you petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, fascist, elite bastards, I got your karma right here." That's a quote from Gatewood Galbraith. Of course, he was well known for his stump speeches. He ran for governor, as was mentioned, and has never shied away from promoting the end of the war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs. And to name the law after him, to name this medical marijuana law after him, what an honor! And it couldn't have, they couldn't have picked a more deserving honor here for Gatewood Galbraith. Some of the things he said throughout his life. If you don't know who Gatewood Galbraith is, you should just go Google him and start reading up on what he's done. If you're serious about marijuana activism, especially if you're serious about hemp activism, you got to know who Gatewood Galbraith is. One of my favorite lines from him: "If I was going to lie to you, I'd already be elected." I love that line. And a couple of other things that he said here. He's always pointed out that what we do in this name of the war on drugs is anti-American. One of his quotes was, "Did my father's generation hit the beaches of Normandy and Iwo Jima, so that I'd have to pee in a cup to hold a job in America? I mean, these are just the wisdom of Gatewood Galbraith is going to survive. And I really hope that the people of Kentucky will get behind this law and just realize some basic compassion for sick and disabled people in the state. He's always been a promoter of that, always pointed out how the drug war harms people, harms Americans, harms the farmers of Kentucky. He pointed out one time back in 1990, if Kentucky is going to survive, they're going to have to reach back and grab a plant that our granddaddies used to grow by the thousands of acres. And, so it's not just medical marijuana. It's not just the use of it as a recreational substance, but also its use as hemp. And one last quote from Gatewood Galbraith to end this one up that's just perfect. He once said in 1991, when he appeared with Willie Nelson calling for the legalization of marijuana, he said, quote, "Our relationship with Mother Earth is the most basic relationship that we have in this birth-death cycle. And when a government tells us that we cannot go to our mother source, that is the earth, and plant a seed in God's green earth, and utilize the green plant that comes out of there in its natural form for our fiber and food and medicine needs, then that government is awry, and the government no longer represents the best interests of the citizens of this country."
There is a new strain of marijuana from Israel, but it might not be the most popular at your local medical marijuana dispensary. Researchers in Israel have announced that they have developed what they are calling a highless marijuana, a marijuana strain that contains less than 1% THC, the chemical most associated with getting consumers high. The strain, called Avidecal, I think that's how they pronounce it, does contain a beefed up 16.3% of cannabidiol, the CBDs that have all the anti-inflammatory benefits in the body. Now, it does not have the molecules that attach to the brain's receptors the way that the THC attaches to the brain's receptors, so consumers don't feel that traditional high. Israeli grower Tikkun Olam developed Avidecal specifically for the high CBD percentage to help those that use marijuana medicinally so they can get the health benefits without feeling high. Creating a strain such as this goes on the assumption that the euphoria that a patient feels from consuming cannabis has no medical benefits to the patient. And of course, here in America, marijuana with less than 1% THC is still illegal. Industrial hemp can be kept at less than 1% THC, and it's just as illegal as your favorite cushy dank strain that you can pick up from your nearest medical marijuana dispensary or your favorite local dealer.
Well, this is good news, folks. I mean, the only thing I ever worry about whenever I hear about these different strains of cannabis being grown medicinally for medicinal purposes that lack THC is the worry about that being the only cannabis we're allowed to get. Now, if they want to grow cannabis with a high CBD content and no THC, if they want to grow strains and process them and make sprays and inhalers and tinctures and suppositories and creams and balms and salves and all that, great! That's fantastic. We want that. We want to see more development of cannabinoid pharmaceuticals, so long as we can still get the real thing. So long as you allow us to grow the plant and use the bud, we're cool with whatever else you want to do with it. The only thing I fear is when they develop these high CBD strains and with no THC is that the governments, the prohibitionary governments, especially here in America, might turn to that as a way of getting around their problem with medical marijuana. I mean, the problem is that 80% of the people support it, right? They actually think it's a bad idea to throw sick people in cages for their use of pot. So long as the government doesn't try to take that THC-less marijuana and make that the only marijuana that's available for medical marijuana patients, Governor Christie, I'm looking at you, that's something you'd think of. As long as that's not the case, then I can support all of these developments. It's up to us, though, to keep fighting for the liberty of the raw, natural medical plant form itself. And so long as we have that, they can do whatever other development they like.
And Oregon just might be the third state that we can cover for marijuana legalization efforts come November. We already know that Washington state voters and the voters of Colorado will get to vote on legalizing marijuana for adults in their state. Oregon had 3 competing initiatives that advocates were trying to get on the ballot, all legalizing marijuana in some way for adults. Now, the validity rates on the signature sheets that had been turned in have been problematic for all 3 campaigns. The deadline for getting the 87,000 valid signatures to qualify for the ballot in November was last last Friday. The Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, the initiative that was spearheaded by the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation founder and the owner of THCF Clinics, Paul Stanford, is the last one standing with a shot at getting in the hands of the voters. Backers of Octa say that they collected more than 165,000 signatures in that attempt to reach the 87,000 signature threshold. Paul Stanford, who has clinics in multiple medical marijuana states, thinks that the ballot should hit the mark easily. Now, many of those signatures had already been turned in and some had already been disqualified, but Stanford says that this last push and signature drive, that the validity rates will be much higher since they paid extra care with these last all-important signatures. Octa, if passed, would legalize marijuana for adults over 21 in Oregon, and it also calls for the creation of a cannabis commission that would oversee retail sales, marijuana cultivation, and have the power to limit the amount of marijuana a person could purchase. The Cannabis Commission would do work similar to the Alcohol Commission that oversees alcohol sales and regulations, but the difference would be the absence of bar-type establishments. Under the proposal, marijuana possession would be decriminalized, although public pot consumption would be prohibited and subject to a fine of $250. Now, if the measure qualifies and if voters pass it, it will take effect on January 1st, 2013. Steve Trout, the Oregon elections director, says the state now has 30 days to verify if enough signatures are on there for it to qualify for the ballot. And as soon as they announce that, we will let you know, as well as get Paul to come talk about this latest attempt to legalize cannabis for all uses.
Yeah, this is great news, and I do really hope that the signature validity is higher than it was during the early signature turn-ins at the end of May. When they turned in at the end of May, they turned in 100 and some odd, about 108,000. They were 8 short of 108,000 signatures, and the validity of those 108 turned out to be 51.73%. Now, that's not what the Secretary of State's eventual validity was, because what they did is they took the 108, got rid of 12,000 right off the bat, and then tested 96,000 that were left for their validity, which came up around 58% or so. But I don't consider that because you turned in 108,000. We need to consider how many of the 108,000 that you got turned in were valid. If that same 51.73 validity holds up for the overall 165,000 that's turned in, that's 85,000 signatures. That's 2,000 signatures short of what we'll need to make the ballot. So I really, really hope the signature validity has gone up in this latest round. And thanks, Carrie, for the news. I got one last thing I just have to get off my chest. While I was on vacation surfing around the net, I once again saw, for the 117th millionth time, somebody posting the Lincoln Prohibition quote. If you've never heard this, this is something that people attribute to Abraham Lincoln, and the quote goes something like this: "Prohibition goes beyond the bounds of reason in that it attempts to control a man's appetite by legislation and makes a crime out of things that are not crimes. A prohibition law strikes a blow at the very principles upon which our government is founded." Folks, stop using this quote. It is a fake. I've got the paper right here from 1922 that shows that an anti-prohibition wet back in the alcohol prohibition days faked that Lincoln quote. Stop using it. You're making us look stupid.
It's 420 back in Idaho, where Russ and Carrie were born. So we have to go connect with our roots. You know what I mean? Please support these sponsors who support the Russ Belville Show.
We're going to talk about more fake quotes, more stories that we missed over the past week, and all that kind of stuff coming up on Hour 2 in Toker Talk Radio. So make sure you stay around after 4 p.m. Pacific. But coming up next, Roots Monday, live music from Fruition right here at Rolla J Studios. Stay tuned. It's the Russ Belville Show. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney, Omar Figueroa." Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com. russbelville.com.
The Russ Belville Show.
I'm not very good at singing songs, but here's a try.
According to lifelong pot smoker and rocket scientist Carl Sagan, making apple pies from scratch is extremely difficult.
If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe.
Radical Russ and the Rolla J Studios crew will be right back after these messages.
A morning filled with 400 billion suns. The rising of the Milky Way. The cosmos is full beyond measure.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Roots Monday, featuring the blues, country, folk, and jazz music that birthed the modern sounds we enjoy today. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
All right, folks, we're going to turn things over to Herb Thrasher. If you've not caught his show yet, Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, it's every Friday night at 8 o'clock Pacific time, runs from 8 to 10, 2 hours of metal, rock, hardcore, thrash, and surprisingly enough, bluegrass. I know, it sounds kind of weird, but Herb's got this attitude like bluegrass and some of that music is almost like the metal of country. Like they play so fast and they play, that kind of stuff. So he's really into the bluegrass stuff. And he hit upon this band that was called Fruition. And they're a band out of Portland, Oregon. And invited them to come to the studio. So we had them in the studio last Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, where they sat in and played some live music for us. So turn things over here to Herb Thrasher from last Friday. This is Fruition from right here in Portland.
This is a soft little, pretty little song that we just started doing.
Love these guys. Turn it up, folks.
I was born beneath the ocean not too long ago. I didn't learn how to walk until I knew how to swim, at least how to stay afloat. I rolled and I tumbled across the bottom of the sea. I reached and I struggled forever when I let go. The air came to me. Can't fight that kind of force now, can you, baby? 'Cause you won't ever win. You can't move like that water if you want to. So come on and get in. I forgot about the ocean. Oh, how can I let that be? Everything is wild in the eyes of a child. Oh, but it wasn't for me. I went back to that shoreline. I wept and was swept up in the tide. I reached and I struggled for words, but then I knew that child was right. Can't fight that kind of force now, can you, baby? 'Cause you won't ever win. You can't move like that water if you want to. So come on and get in. come on and get in. So come on, get in.
Wow, that was amazing right there, dude. So freaking awesome. See, guys, they don't
That's
always
music
have
from
to be
Fruition
heavy,
from the
man.
Herb
They
Thrasher
really
Flower
don't.
Hour. You can
Appreciate
catch that
you
every
guys for
Friday night at 8 o'clock Pacific time. Herb Thrasher Flower Hour here with metal and, the occasional alt country surprise like Fruition. All right, folks, when we come back, we are going to have some time for some rant. It looks like we're having some trouble getting Rod Pittman in the studio. He emailed me earlier and said he was having some emergencies to deal with. We'll see what we can do about that. In the meantime, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll have something for you. Stick around. It's the Russ Belville Show.
Dear Mom, when I was in college, I used to drink a lot. It was kind of crazy. But now that I'm older, I prefer to use marijuana. It's less harmful to my body, I don't get hungover, and honestly, I feel safer around marijuana users. I hope this makes sense, but if not, let's talk. I love you.
Attention, National Cannabis Radio listeners. If you haven't heard the political pontifications of Lively and Mr. Libra on the Libra Lounge yet, be sure to visit here Wednesday nights at 6 Pacific or visit thelibralounge.com for archives and links to download current episodes. Be a lounger.
The Libra Lounge.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant. All right, folks, calling an audible here. We're going to have to go into rant mode because, boy, I got something to rant about on this one. It's the case of Super Cop. You know, there's a lot of super cops out there. Not your regular, ordinary law enforcement officers gifted with but the 5 regular senses that us normal humans possess. I'm talking, of course, about Super Cop. You know they're out there. It's a special mutant force out there that have special sorts of abilities to detect crimes going on. And these super cops are given wide latitude by our courts to be able to use their special senses and powers of perception to be able to bust us nasty pot smokers. Let me tell you the latest story of Super Cop in action. A 9th Circuit court panel has reversed the decision of a district court in a case where one of these super cops busted a marijuana grow house after claiming he could smell it from 450 feet away while patrolling in his car. That's right, driving by in his car, football field and a half away, he can smell your grow house. Now, this reversal by the 9th Circuit Court allows the government to move forward with the prosecutions of Trace and Jennifer Toms of Wasilla, Alaska, over their marijuana grow, where authorities seized over 500 plants. Now, what had happened in this case? The district court, on appeal, overturned a magistrate court which had allowed the plants into evidence based on the warrant that the super cop gave that he could smell the stuff from 150 yards away. Now, the original court said, okay, yeah, we believe you. Yeah, we believe that you could smell that from 150 yards away. No problem. We'll enter all of this marijuana into evidence from your search warrant and we'll bust these people. But then the appellate court, the district court said, now hold on here just a second. That doesn't seem reasonable that this guy could smell that from so far away. And in fact, the defense brought in an expert to testify. The defense brought in an expert from the Pennsylvania School of Medicine's Smell and Taste Center. Okay, this guy who researches smell and taste for a living testified there was 0% chance that this grow house could have been smelled from 150 yards away from within a patrol car. Now, the trooper in question, this super cop we're talking about, his name is Kyle Young, and he's a 20-year veteran of the state police. Now, he was driving around in his trooper vehicle there in a residential area around 1:20 in the morning on February 22nd of 2010. And according to his report, he claims he detected, quote, the strong odor of cultivating marijuana, end quote. Now, Trooper Young has, in his career, busted between 100 to 150 such grow houses based on his ability to smell them, he claims in an interview with the Anchorage Daily News. He then claims in his report that he stopped to determine which house he was downwind from, and then his nose can tell the direction, by the way. Not just can he smell the grow houses, he can tell which direction it's coming from, right? And he determined that he was downwind from the Tom's residence. He then proceeded to snoop through their personal records, finding out that Trace had a 2005 felony marijuana conviction and that his wife had electric bills totaling $800 a month. Later that day, after they got a search warrant, the Alaska troopers discovered the grow operation and the plants. Okay, so some of you listen to this might go, well, seems pretty cut and dried, doesn't it? Cop smells pot growing, follows up, finds some corroborating evidence, gets a legal search warrant, and busts a grow house. What's wrong with that? Well, there's some situations up in Alaska that make this story a little bit more different and kind of shows that Trooper Young, like a lot of super cops, conveniently smells what he wants to when he thinks someone's a pot grower. Because, first of all, in Alaska, they have this little decision in their Supreme Court called Raven v. Alaska. And what that decision says is that it decriminalizes the possession and cultivation of marijuana for personal use in one's own home. It basically affirmed that the Alaska Constitution's constitutional protections for privacy are so strong that it supersedes the state's interest in trying to bust you for growing a little bit of pot. And because of that decision, Raven v. State, Alaskans may possess up to 4 ounces and cultivate up to 25 plants in their homes for personal use. That's their privacy right. So how awesome is Trooper Young's nose that it can detect that there were more than the personally allowed 25 plants in the Tom's residence? I smell skunk. That smells like 300 plants. No. 500. That's got to be 500 plants with that much smell. Right. How awesome is that? He can tell this difference in smell between 25 plants and 3.
Well, Kaliko and I had an incident with a cop who could tell we had 40 pounds in our trunk.
Oh, yeah, right. You tell him about that.
Trained.
Yeah.
They're trained. I mean,
You had a super cop, yeah.
Doing. Yeah, they're super cops, just like Jean-Claude Van Damme. They can tell exactly how much pot in your... He was a little off. We actually had a quarter gram.
Yeah, quarter gram, 40 pounds. Close.
Close.
Kaliko?
Close on a grand scale.
Hey, Kaliko, you're Eddie.
Well, yeah, I mean, just basically 40 pounds, quarter gram, yeah.
Super cop.
Super cop.
Yeah.
Definitely on top of it. Reminded me of the Richie Rich gun smell thing device that they had.
Yeah.
And it was able to tell what was inside of every package.
Yeah, exactly. That's 40 pounds of marijuana.
40 pounds of pot there.
Yeah.
All right, so first you got the Raven decision, right? So people can grow pot in their houses. If you smell pot coming from a house, that's not necessarily any of your business as a state trooper in the state of Alaska. So here's our first problem. Now, second of all, here's the big problem in this case. When Trace Thomas, the man in the case here, got up to testify, he testified that his grow house was well insulated against odor leaks. Being a smart grower, he used a state-of-the-art 100-pound charcoal air filter, which he changed weekly and maintained constantly. The grow house was a separate structure with no windows and just 2 doors and 2 garage doors, both of which were insulated and sealed. The grow house was behind a hill. The hill was where their house was. And between the grow house and the hill and the house and the cop's car, there was another 100 yards of wooded area. So how awesome is Trooper Young's nose that not only can it detect whether a growing cannabis smell is produced by greater than 25 plants, it can do so while a football field and a half away from a hermetically sealed, carbon-filtered, windowless building that's through some woods and behind a hill. You think that's enough? Wait, it gets better. As revealed by Trooper Young's testimony, he already had suspicions about the Toms having a grow house before he smelled anything that night. And what might have given him these suspicions? Well, the government, in its indictment here, is also seeking the civil asset forfeiture of their home, their property, $100,000, 5 snow machines, a Ford F-250, a GMC Yukon Denali, a Rolex gold watch, and a 14-karat diamond wedding ring set. Coincidence? So, how awesome is Trooper Young's nose that it just happens to detect the smell of greater than 25 plants coming from a hermetically sealed building behind the home of someone in small town Wasilla, Alaska, population 10,960-ish, depending on whether or not Sarah Palin's family is home, where he may have noticed Trace driving a new truck, perhaps, or maybe he noticed Jennifer sporting a new diamond ring, and that gives him the suspicion that, oh, they must be up to something. Apparently, this guy's nose is so awesome that the magistrate judge believed Trooper Young and allowed the seized weed into evidence. And the Ninth Circuit, in allowing this to go forward, isn't so much agreeing that Trooper Young has an awesome nose. What it's really doing in its decision is slapping down the district court for, quote, abusing its discretion when it reverses a magistrate judge's credibility determinations made after receiving live testimony, end quote. In other words, the district court can't determine that the live testimony of Super Cop to the magistrate wasn't credible without hearing more live testimony from the Super Cop. So how awesome is Trooper Young's nose that it need only convince one judge that it can smell greater than 25 plants growing in a hermetically sealed, carbon-filtered, windowless building that's through some woods and behind a hill, even though a second judge heard from the executive director of the leading Institute for Taste and Smell Research who said such a feat was impossible because the second judge didn't bother to ask Super Cop whether that was true. Now, you'd think perhaps another way that we could, find the facts in this case would be to determine whether or not could you really smell something coming from their house. I mean, we could take that big 100-pound carbon filter and run it through some tests. We could put it in a lab. We could put some smelly shit behind the filter, put the judge's nose on the other side and see whether he can smell the smelly shit through the filter. Oh no, except for one problem. The Alaska State Troopers, when they were seizing all the evidence, they accidentally dropped the carbon filter and broke it so it couldn't be tested. Isn't that interesting? What an amazing coincidence. All right, enough radical rant. Looks like we're not going to get Rod Pittman for today, so when we come back, I got more stories from this past week to tell you that are going to blow your mind, so stick around. We got more Russ Belville Show coming up, and your calls in Toker Talk Radio for Hour 2. Thanks for joining us.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com. The Normal Network brings you the best in daily Toker tunes at 3 and 9 o'clock Pacific Time, AM and PM every weekday. Each day features a different genre, including Roots Monday.
Folks, here's a story about Minnie the Moocher.
Electric Tuesday. Irie Wednesday.
Summer ganja planter, call me the ganja farmer.
Groovin' Thursday.
Do you wanna get high?
And Rockin' Friday.
Some they'd like to hit the ball, some just take the vibe.
There was one question that was voted on that ranked fairly high, and that was whether legalizing marijuana would improve the economy and job creation. And I don't know what this says about the online audience, but
produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face-to-face with the monster of marijuana, he dropped dead from fright.
You know, it's not easy countering 7 decades of propaganda in a 2-hour show, but let's try. It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Reefer Madness Debunked.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Got some Reefer Madness I collected over the weekend. I'm going to get to that, but before I do, I want to finish up something I ended the news segment with, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's a way of, it's almost like Reefer Madness on our side that we need to end. I mean, if we're going to go forward with this war here, this war on drugs and trying to fight it, as reformers, we need to make sure that our positions are credible. Right. And that's one of the things I want to get around to. In fact, I just got a note from High Times Magazine that one of my articles on this is going to be coming out in the November issue. Top 5 pro-pot myths that must die. We'll get to that sometime later. But right now I want to cover some of these quotes because I see this all the time. I'm reading blogs all the time and people leave comments in these blogs. And many times when they're arguing about legalizing marijuana, they'll put in quotes from the founding fathers to try to bolster their position. And that's what I really want to talk about right now, because it is true that our founders, most of them were colonial farmers that grew hemp, right? So there's no doubt about their use of hemp for food, for fiber, for clothing, and so forth. But the evidence of them using cannabis for smoking, like we do today, is pretty scant. Now, hashish was something that was known. Everybody knew what hashish was, and it was used. Jefferson and Franklin, among others, they went to Europe. They went to France. They partook in the party scene of the day. So, I mean, you could make a case that it's likely they may have tried it or used it. But as far as, definitive proof that they were smoking pot, it's hard to come by. Now, the later 19th century founding fathers, the 19th century presidents like Madison and Monroe, they have written in their biographies and such about smoking hemp or smoking hashish. So we know for sure they did. And Jackson, Taylor, and Pierce were known to have smoked Mexican marijuana while they were fighting alongside their troops in the Southwest. So I'm not trying to say that there's not evidence that presidents smoked pot or that they grew hemp or anything like that. That's all fine. That's all great. And there's plenty of legitimate quotes from our founding fathers on the resourcefulness of hemp and the evidence that they may have smoked it. For example, George Washington wrote in his diaries, quote, "Make the most of the Indian hemp seed and sow it everywhere," end quote. All right, yeah, great. Hemp, sow hemp. We know that. He also remarked about, quote, "The artificial preparation of hemp from Cilicia is really a curiosity," end quote. Now that artificial preparation of hemp sounds a lot like hashish to me. Sounds like we're processing it some way. And Cilicia was this area that's now in Poland. It was Central European, and we knew the Europeans were using hashish. So there's not any doubt about the possibility that that is Washington referring to hemp being processed into hash, and why he found it to be a curiosity. Unless he smoked it, why would he care? But we don't know. That's not definitive proof, right? We also have in his diary where he says he began to separate the male from the female plants, right? And there's 2 reasons you do that, either to get good females for smoking or good males for seed crop. So it could have been that he was trying to get a smoking crop. We have quotes from John Adams, the second president, who said, quote, "We shall by and by want a world of hemp more for our own consumption," end quote. Thomas Jefferson, our third president, wrote, quote, "Hemp is of first necessity to the wealth and protection of the country," end quote. So there are plenty of quotes for you folks if you want to go out there and support hemp and the founding fathers and all of that. But there are 3 quotes you've got to stop using because they are fakes and they have been debunked so thoroughly that when you bring this up in a comments section or in a debate, you're going to look like a fool. Here's the first one. Quote, "Some of my finest hours have been spent sitting on my back veranda, smoking hemp and observing as far as my eye can see," end quote. Thomas Jefferson. Well, I first saw this one on the title card of the DVD Totally Baked. So I went to find the attribution for it because Jefferson is one of our most prolific founding fathers, and just about every letter and essay and book he ever wrote is archived and studied and cataloged. Yet this veranda quote is nowhere to be found. Monticello.org, all of the scholars who have studied Jefferson's writings and papers, none of them can find the veranda quote. So stop using it. The other two quotes are quotes from Abraham Lincoln, so not exactly founding father, but they go back to Abraham Lincoln. And this quote, this one just, every time I say it, just makes me cringe. Quote, "Two of my favorite things are sitting on my front porch, smoking a pipe of sweet hemp and playing my Hohner harmonica." End quote. Abraham Lincoln. Now, this Honest Abe quote, it claims to be from a letter dated 1855 found at the German Harmonica Manufacturers Museum, Hohner, right? Well, that means either Abe Lincoln or Hohner had a time machine, because Hohner didn't ship harmonicas from Germany to the United States until 1857. Plus, the Hohner Museum has no record of any such letter. And finally, I mentioned at the beginning in the show today in the news, prohibition goes beyond the bounds of reason in that it attempts to control a man's appetite by legislation and makes a crime out of things that are not crimes. A prohibition law strikes a blow at the very principles upon which our government was founded. This is not only a fake, it is a purposeful fake. This was a fabrication that was created by the former mayor of Atlanta, Georgia in 1922 during the campaigns for and against alcohol prohibition. Now, back in that day, the people who wanted alcohol were called the wets, and the people who were for prohibition were called the dries. And so this mayor, who was campaigning for the wets, faked this Abraham Lincoln quote to try to win the black vote against prohibition. He was trying, because of course the black vote was, they loved Abraham Lincoln, Emancipation Proclamation and everything, right? So it was a fake, and I showed you the picture of it earlier. You can go to my blog at radicalruss.com. I have got the screen grabs of the actual newspaper print from 1922 saying, "Authorship of anti-prohibition screed credited to Lincoln is admitted by Georgia wet leader. Statement attributed to great emancipator, widely circulated by liquor advocates in wet and dry campaigns, challenged repeatedly for proof which could not be produced. Former mayor of Atlanta, campaign leader for the Wets, wrote the screed in order to win the Negro vote in the local fight." So folks, those are the three quotes I would please ask you to stop using. The Thomas Jefferson veranda quote, the Abraham Lincoln Hohner harmonica quote, and the Abraham Lincoln prohibition strikes a blow at the principles of mankind quote. Please stop using them and go ahead and go back to the other founding fathers quotes so that we can keep our arguments keep some credibility to our arguments. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more here on the Russ Belville Show. Stick around.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
All right, welcome back, folks. Just adjusting things here. We were missing Rod Pittman today. He's the director of Hamsters Plant the Seed and A Normal Life. And I got this note from him just the other day. This is the card from A Normal Life here and Hamsters Plant the Seed. And it says, I don't know if you can read that there. It says, "I'm your new neighbor. Linda said we should meet." There is a artist's enclave, I guess. I don't know. It's this apartment building right across the street from Roller J Studios here that have these artist flats, kind of these low-cost housing for artists. And apparently Rod lives there now. So he was just going to walk across the street here, come down to the studio, and we talk a little bit. But he had some emergencies come up. So we'll try to get him up on a later episode of the Russ Belville Show. Also want to remind you, schedule-wise, we've got shows today and we got a show tomorrow. But Wednesday, I am flying to Pomeroy, Ohio, just outside of Akron, for the Starwood 32 Consciousness Festival. And I'll be bringing you live coverage from Starwood on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So our regularly scheduled lineup won't be seen. You'll be catching live videos and commentary from myself. So check that out, Starwood 32. And then next week, back to regularly scheduled programming.
Hey, but along the same lines of Rod Pittman, we had 2 directors lined up for this week. Tomorrow we have Adam Scorgi, of course, from the Union, the Business of Getting High, and he's got a new project that he's working on right now called the Culture High, and he's actually going to be on talking about the Kickstarter project that he's got going. He'll be on tomorrow's show at the 3:30 interview, so be sure to be checking that out. Adam Scorgi from the Union.
Yeah, we were looking forward to having director and then another director, so it's been kind of cool. But we will get them both. Adam Scorgi tomorrow, Rod Pittman at a later date. All right, so to close out the show today, I want to talk about a news story or a headline I saw just before airtime, about 1 o'clock today. I saw this headline. It's up on Huffington Post, and it said, Christie calls war on drugs a failure. Ooh, Chris Christie. Now, if you don't know, Chris Christie is the rotund governor of New Jersey, a cruel bastard who has denied their medical marijuana law for over 2 years now. And don't be fooled into thinking that he actually wants to end the drug war. What you're getting here, and what prohibitionists on both sides of the aisle are doing, and probably with a lot of coaching from Dr. Kevin Sabet, is they still agree with the drug war. Don't think that they don't like the drug war. They like the drug war. They like the goal of the drug war. And the goal of the drug war, of course, is that the government should, by force, prevent citizens from using drugs that lack the barcodes of major corporate campaign contributors. Okay? Now, in case you missed it, these drug warriors, they're not stupid. They're aware that Americans, according to the polls, are sick of the drug war and think it's a failure. They see the polls that show majority support for marijuana legalization and supermajority support for medical marijuana. They see 2, possibly 3 states voting to legalize marijuana this November. And so they are terrified that the American people might start putting an end to this endless war that provides jobs for prison guards, extra constitutional powers for police, easy tough-on-crime speechifying for politicians, and of course, suppresses competition to energy, pharmaceutical, timber, and food megacorporations. So now they're all, the drug war is a failure, war on drugs is a failure, and they're changing to what I call the kinder, gentler drug war. Let me use the words here of Governor Chris Christie. This was Governor Christie quoted from a speech he did at the Brookings Institution. Quote, "The war on drugs, while well-intentioned, has been a failure." There's your problem right there. Well-intentioned. The war on drugs was well-intentioned. What was the intention of the war on drugs? To lock people in cages if they use drugs. See, they still like that intention. Quote, "We're warehousing addicted people every day in state prisons in New Jersey, giving them no treatment." End quote. Christie stressed the merits of legislation recently passed by New Jersey state lawmakers that institutes a year of mandatory treatment for first-time, non-violent drug offenders instead of jail time. The mandatory treatment program, slated to be put in place in at least 3 counties during its first year, will eventually expand statewide over the next 5 years. Quote, "It cost us $49,000 a year to warehouse a prisoner in the New Jersey state prisons last year. A full year of inpatient drug treatment costs $24,000 a year." So that's, again, reporting from Huffington Post. And look, folks, when they say that the war on drugs is a failure, what they mean is it's too expensive and too unpopular to achieve their goals of stopping everyone from using drugs that don't benefit corporate America. That's all. While it's laudable to offer drug treatment to addicts, people aren't thrown in jail for being drug addicts. People are thrown in jail for using certain drugs. What Christie is offering here is a nicer cage for the users of unbarcoded drugs. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you're at a Springsteen concert in New Jersey, of course, and you're hanging out there with a friend and you pass him a joint. That act right there, passing that joint, makes you a felon in the state of New Jersey, and you're looking at 1.5 years of prison time and a $25,000 fine. But instead, Governor Christie wants to force you into a year of rehab that you don't need, with random P-tests to keep tabs on you. This way, the P-testers get jobs, the rehabs fill beds, and the New Jersey state troopers still get to shake you down for having a little bit of weed and seize your assets. But at least the general public thinks we're doing the Christian thing and providing a way out for the doomed addicts. Oh, and those second-timers or the first-timers who fail their P-test, well, for them, it's back to the cage, often for longer sentences than they would have had if they'd have just chosen the cage over rehab in the first place. So we also get to keep the jobs for the cops and the prison guards. Notice that nobody ever proposes mandatory rehab for alcoholics. Oh, sure. Yeah, if you get multiple DUIs or you get in a bar fight or you beat your wife or something when you're drunk, a judge may sentence a drinker to rehab or AA or something. But that comes in response to an actual crime, doesn't it? Like driving impaired or assault and battery. But if we find a guy in a bar passed out on his bar stool at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from too many shots of whiskey, no cop's going to arrest him, and no court's going to force him to choose between rehab or prison for simply being drunk. They're just going to call him a cab and send him home. Look, I'm a big proponent of drug treatment. It saved my dad's life. But the only way it worked is because he hit rock bottom and decided to go to treatment. You cannot force people to get well. All you're going to do is spend $24,000 housing a pot smoker who will dutifully pass all the P tests for a year, either by cheating or abstaining. Since we're not physically addictive, this is pretty easy. And the day they're free from rehab, they're going to join up with their friends, puff up huge bowls of weed in celebration, and just try to be more careful and not get caught the next time. The entire problem with the war on drugs and what they cannot comprehend is that most people who use drugs use them responsibly and occasionally have a good time and then go back to being productive members of society.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Look, if a few people become drug addicts, that's no more reason to ban drugs than the fact that some people become alcoholics. The problem with the drug war is not the tactics we've used to fight it. It's that we've declared a war on free citizens and the law of supply and demand in the first place.